All right, well, Casper's back. How you doing, Casper?
Hey, good. How are you guys?
Rock and roll, sister.
I love that answer. How are you guys? Rock and roll.
So Brett Ehrlich's my new bud on the post games. We've done like 18 in a row. I think we're gonna do another one today. I don't know. So he's in my kids' school. There's big buddies and little buddies. And Joy gets super excited when her big buddies coming in from 5th grade.
Oh.
Okay. So Brett's become my buddy. Anyways, okay, we got a hell of a show today. We got crazy Saudi Arabia story. We got a crazy Israel story. We have a crazy Ted Cruz story broken by, oh, not a big deal, TYT. Okay, so you're gonna love that. Melania feels maligned. There's something there. There's hashtag maligned.
Look, Melania, in my view, has been off limits. You know, as first lady, she didn't want any of this. She got dragged into it, and I hate watching people criticize her for ridiculous things. But today is the day. She's gonna get it.
She gonna get it now. All right, we'll look
it's
into
justified criticism.
Yeah, look, who did you think she was? She married Donald Trump. Okay, anyways, a little bit later. Okay, speaking of Trump, if you think we're not gonna talk about Kanye, you're very wrong. Okay, so, but here's the drama involved in that. I've changed my mind on Kanye. What is this? Okay. So I don't know anybody who's more critical of Kanye West than me. I ranked him as one of the most unintelligent people in America. After an incredible, ridiculous performance in the Oval Office, I have actually totally changed my mind. I'm the only one going the opposite direction as everyone else. Yeah. But I'll explain why, and I think it's really important. So, and we got a lot of clips from Kanye, and it's, I think, super relevant to the state of the country that Oval Office meeting happened, okay? So we'll get to that a little bit later in the program. Obviously, if you're a member, do you get the whole show? Do you get a commercial free? tyt.com/join. All right, let's go to the Saudis, go.
All right. A Saudi journalist and also a Saudi dissident, his name is Jamal Khashoggi, has gone missing after he visited the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. Now, as I mentioned, he had decided to leave Saudi Arabia after he criticized the Saudi royals, and apparently when he went to this consulate in Istanbul, he went specifically to get a document in order to marry his Turkish fiancée, and he's been missing since. Now, Turkish investigators argue that he is dead. However, the Saudi government is arguing that no, that is not the case. The Turkish investigators have concluded that he's dead. The Saudi government maintains that he left the consulate on October 2nd and is not in their custody. Now, the Saudis have not provided any evidence of that, and so far surveillance from the consulate does not show him leaving after he had gone there to get the documents he needed to marry his fiancée. Now, Khashoggi, a Saudi citizen, has been living in self-imposed exile in the United States since last year. He visited the Saudi consulate in Istanbul to collect a document that would allow him to marry his Turkish fiancée, but was told that he would have to return. So he actually left, went to a conference in London, and then returned to the consulate at the time that was specified. Now, this is where things start to get very strange and incredibly devastating if you're to believe what the Turkish investigation has found. So a senior Turkish official said that within 2 hours of his arrival, Mr. Khashoggi was killed by a team of Saudi agents who dismembered his body with a bone saw they brought for that very purpose. And there were chartered flights that contained Saudi officials, as many as 15 Saudi officials that came from Saudi Arabia to this Saudi consulate in Istanbul. 15 Saudi agents had arrived on 2 charter flights last Tuesday, the day that Mr. Khashoggi disappeared. And this is according to the Turkish official who did speak to the press on the condition of anonymity. All 15 left just a few hours later, and Turkey has now identified the roles that most or all of them held in the Saudi government or security services. One was an autopsy expert, presumably there to help dismember the body. Now, I want to be clear about something. There are conflicts in the various accounts and stories coming forward. This is what we're hearing from the Turkish side of the story. We have no proof or evidence at the moment. But with that said, from what I gather in this story, what the investigators are telling us seems to make the most sense.
All right, well, look, so here's some important context. We shared some of it with you yesterday. But first of all, the Turkish government is having issues with the Saudi government. That should be noted. It is very important context. They're more on the side of Qatar and has been beefing, if you will, with Saudi Arabia and UAE. So there's some diplomatic bad feelings there. If there weren't, I don't know the Turkish government would be this vigilant in following up with this crime and showing you all the gory details, if that is true. But secondly, the American government, with the notable exception of Donald Trump, which we'll get to in a second, has been fairly outraged by this. Now, the American government is allied with Saudi Arabia.
Yes.
And so if they're outraged by it, well, there's some pretty good chance that they think that the Saudis did it, okay? And that would be very, very relevant.
So for me, what kind of swayed me on the side of believing what the Turkish investigators have found is what we've seen through US intelligence intercepts, right? So I want to give you the information on that real quick. Let's go to graphic 7. So according to the Washington Post, US intelligence intercepts obtained by the Post showed the operation was ordered by the Saudi Arabian Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Now, the Crown Prince has had issues with this journalist because this journalist has been highly critical of him, which is why he was living in the United States due to his own self-imposed exile. And so if these intercepts say what the Washington Post claims they say, it appears that the Saudi officials, under the direction of the Saudi Arabian Crown Prince, did go after this journalist. The question is, did they really murder him or did they simply abduct him?
So look, some things are indisputable. Khashoggi was part of the inner circle of the Saudi government, and they felt that he betrayed them. So it's like the case of the poisoning in the UK with the Russians. A Russian agent that flipped on Putin gets poisoned in the middle of the UK. Gee, I wonder who did it. I mean, it wasn't the Norwegians, okay? So in this guy, they felt particularly betrayed by Khashoggi. They tried to lure him, these are undisputed facts. They tried to lure him back into Saudi Arabia with fake promises of jobs and forgiveness, etc.
Right.
And he didn't buy it and thought that that was a trap. He was right about that. We apparently had information that the Saudis were trying to capture him. We did not warn Khashoggi, who was a Washington Post columnist living in Virginia, but we didn't warn him. So that was a terrible mistake, I think, by the US government. And then we know he went into the consulate and we know he did not come out. So that's not a good fact pattern for the Saudis. So where is he? I mean, right now, the Crown Prince might be in the middle of writing a book. If I did it, this is how he did it, right? And I'm sure he's looking for the real killer. But if they didn't kill him, we'd like to see him.
Right.
And so far, nobody's seen him since.
Exactly. So now the latest update to the story has been the reaction from the US government. And so, of course, there has been a lot of attention paid to what Trump has had to say about this. Now, if you can recall, earlier in his term, Trump had signed a deal with Saudi Arabia in order to sell weapons to the Saudis. In fact, to give you details, in May, Trump signed a multi-billion-dollar arms agreement with Saudi Arabia worth $110 billion immediately and $350 billion over 10 years, which would supply Saudi Arabia with tanks, missile defense systems, and fighter jets. And so the big question was, well, it appears that the Saudi royals have done something horrible here. So doesn't it make sense to halt the sale of weapons to Saudi Arabia? And here's what Trump had to say in response to that.
I don't like stopping massive amounts of money that's being poured into our country. I know they're talking about different kinds of sanctions, but they're spending $110 billion on military equipment and on things that create jobs, like jobs and others for this country. I don't like the concept of stopping an investment of $110 billion into the United States. Because you know what they're going to do? They're going to take that money and spend it in Russia or China or someplace else. So I think there are other ways. If it turns out to be as bad as it might be, there are certainly other ways of handling the situation. But I will tell you up front right now, and I'll say it in front of senators, they're spending $110 billion purchasing military equipment and other things. If we don't sell it to them, they'll say, well, thank you very much, we'll buy it from Russia, or thank you very much, we'll buy it from China. That doesn't help us. But as to whether or not we should stop $110 billion from being spent in this country, knowing they have 4 or 5 alternatives, 2 very good alternatives, that would not be acceptable to me.
So I just want to make a quick side note, Cenk, before you jump in. Remember that one of the biggest issues that Trump and Republicans specifically have with Iran is that, hey, you know what? The Iran nuclear deal isn't enough. Iran is, sponsoring terrorism throughout the world. They're also taking place in proxy wars, including Syria, for instance, Yemen, another example. And I think that that's a legitimate criticism. But isn't the United States engaging in very similar activity if we're supplying Saudi Arabia with weaponry like this, knowing that they're committing these types of crimes against humanity? I don't know.
Well, they would say, oh my God, how could you dare you compare those two things? Hezbollah from time to time has killed civilians. And what has Saudi Arabia done again in Yemen? Killed thousands upon thousands of civilians, displaced millions of people. But Trump's logic is, who cares? We're making money off of it. Now, what he doesn't tell you is, I mean, he disguises it as almost all politicians do, to be fair, in terms of, oh, we're creating jobs in America. Yeah, you're also creating a lot of money that the defense contractors give you and almost all the Republicans. And by the way, a lot of the Democrats. So they're among the top campaign contributors, and they spread that political bribes all throughout the political class. So that's why the political guys, we're gonna really, I mean, those guys write me checks. They write me checks. We're really gonna stop it over some other dude that they killed. They didn't kill me, they killed that guy. So now to be fair, some of the politicians, including Republican politicians, nonetheless have been tough on Saudi Arabia, and I wanna applaud him for that, but not Trump. Trump is all about the money, his own, and he just looks at it from that point of view. Look, one more thing. Under his logic, well, we're making money. That means we could sell weapons to anybody, including Iran. You say, well, I mean, Iran could get it from Russia, they could get it from China, they might as well get it from us. Let's make some money, right? But we don't do that. We go, never! No one should ever sell weapons to Iran or Hezbollah or anyone else.
Exactly.
Under that logic, we can give to North Korea. I mean, Trump might, right? But no, there are some countries you should not sell weapons to if they show complete disregard for human life, civilians, and the rule of law. On the other hand, there is another leader who shows total disregard for rule of law.
Exactly, and disregard for human life is really the more devastating point here, because remember, Trump is the president of the United States, and in this particular case, he shows a clear disregard for human life. I mean, he seems to be completely uninformed about Khashoggi, who he is, where he lived, why he lived there. I'll give you an example of that. Just take a look at the next video where he seems to be unaware of where Khashoggi was living. Video 2.
First, I want to find out what happened, and we're looking. Again, this took place in Turkey, and to the best of our knowledge, Khashoggi is not a United States citizen. Is that right, or is that right? He's a permanent resident, okay.
So again, he was living in the United States, he was a permanent resident, and it was self-imposed exile because of fear of retaliation from the Saudis.
Hey, look, you're about to go on national television. For God's sake, just do like 1 minute of homework. You're about to say, hey, I don't care that they dismembered a Washington Post columnist living in Virginia who's a permanent resident. Can you find out where did he live? Like what? The first question I would ask, I would assume that you would ask is, hey, wait, is he a US citizen? That's a fair question, right? If he's a US citizen, we got more interest in it. I wish it weren't the case. We should care about all human beings, but that makes sense. He's the president of America. Is he? He didn't bother asking if he's a citizen. He's like, is he a citizen? Dude, ask the questions before you go in front of the cameras. Do 1 minute of homework. And so
we're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars on one hand, and a Washington Post reporter on the other. Like, why would he care? I mean, if that's not what he believes or what he genuinely thinks, it's certainly coming across that way. And by the way,
can I just say, Anna, sorry to interrupt. I mean, he calls the Washington Post and other outlets, media outlets, enemy of the people.
Yes.
So, like we did a story on it yesterday. Geraldo Rivera was outraged by it. Outraged by what? I mean, the guy says that the press is the enemy of the people. Geraldo, I don't know if you know this. You're part of the press, kind of, right? And so, is it that much of a stretch to go from enemy of the people to killing them? They're the enemy of the people. That's exactly the category that the government targets. So now in this case, it's our press, but the Saudi government considered him an enemy of the people. So it appears they killed him. And does Trump look concerned?
Well, if that wasn't enough evidence for you, we have one more video, regarding his thoughts on the Saudis specifically. Take a look.
What's at stake with U.S.-Saudi relations, sir?
I would say they're excellent. I've told them they've got to pay for their military. You know, Saudi Arabia is a very rich country.
Okay, so you know what the priorities are.
You know, in another part of that insane Fox and Friends conversation, they asked him, "Did you talk to the Saudis about Khashoggi?" And he said, "Well, I can't talk about that, but yes." What? You just did. You just talked about it. Okay.
I don't know. I feel hopeless with this guy. So.
Yeah. So look, of course he's not going to defend the press. Of course he's not going to. And if he's going to do anything at all, I mean, like if you're the Saudi government and you just dismember this guy, right? And you just saw Trump go, well, I care more about the money. And they're a very rich country, right? Mm-hmm. And what did you just hear? You just heard green light. You thought, well, we probably have the green light ahead of time. He hates the press. All he cares about is money. He's our big ally, and we're buttering him up on his personal fortune as well. Mm-hmm. And apparently, U.S. intelligence knew that they were going to take some action against Khashoggi, and U.S. did nothing. Green light, green light, green light. Afterwards, still, when it comes to Trump, green light. Do whatever you like, kill whoever you like, as long as you keep paying us, and particularly me and my party.
Well, there are some senators that do deserve some credit for speaking out against what's going on. Some of those senators are actually Republicans, so let's get to that angle of this story. Following news of a Saudi journalist disappearance, this is Jamal Khashoggi, the Saudi journalist who self-exiled here to the United States and was a reporter at the Washington Post. A number of US senators spoke out, many of which believe that maybe we need to rethink our relationship with the Saudis if they're engaging in this type of behavior. One of those senators is Republican Lindsey Graham. Let's take a look at what he has to say.
He went into the embassy, he never came out. He gave his fiancée his phone. Most people would come out to get their phone back, talk to their fiancée, so this doesn't add up. How hard is this? Where is the guy? But this man was murdered in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. That would cross every line of normality in the international community. If it did happen, they would be held to pay.
Okay, so we're the fairest show in America. Can't stand Lindsey Graham. He's a huge warmonger, let alone what he did in the Kavanaugh hearings. But that is right. But I'll give him further credit on this issue. He is a huge ally of Israel and Saudi Arabia. Lindsey Graham is historically. And so he's not speaking out, like if it was Iran, easy, layup. He's like, yes, let's go to war, right? But it's not. It's an ally of ours that he has helped conduct other wars. So he is actually being genuine there, and that's principled. So it's good to know. Let's see how long it lasts.
Right.
But we give credit where credit is due.
Exactly. And I also want to mention that there were qualifiers in his statements. If the Saudis did it, there's a lot of ifs, right?
But that's okay.
That's fine. Sure, it's okay. But remember, there's a lot of pressure on the US government right now in response to this story. And so it's very easy to initially say one thing and then not follow it with actual, with actions. And so that's the one thing I'm kind of concerned with. Now, 22 senators so far have signed a letter to Donald Trump asking him to really look into this and rethink our relationship with Saudi Arabia. So that's a good first step. I'm just saying it's important for us to hold these senators' feet to the fire and not just feel appeased as soon as they say one thing.
No, I hear they're going to do order an FBI investigation of it, but only for a week, and then even less than a week, and they're going to talk to 9 people and then wrap it up. No, by the way, it's actually worse than that. Kidding aside, they are asking the Saudis. The U.S. government is asking the Saudis to investigate themselves. Well, I'm sure that'll solve it. But here, Graham speaking out, look, I said, look, if Israel and Saudi Arabia continue to be strong allies, I would be surprised if these senators didn't drop it within a week. But I'd be super happy to be wrong, and then I'll come out and tell you guys. And I'm not even wrong, like surprised by that, right? So I'm giving them credit for now, but of course we'll follow up.
Exactly. Now, Bob Corker, another Republican, spoke out as well, so I wanted to show you his reaction to all this. Take a look.
There's a tape of him going on. The intel points directly at them and them thinking about this in advance. I mean, I think they did it, and unfortunately, I think that he's deceased.
So that's strong words from Corker. I think they did it. And he might have seen intelligence that we haven't seen, so that does not look good. Look, if you're wondering why I keep mentioning Israel, because obviously the US government, both in Republican and Democratic times, say Israel is our strongest ally. I think Israel's an ally. I think it's important. I don't think it's our strongest ally. Canada, UK, etc., and often causes trouble. But I'm giving you in the context of Washington, there is no more important ally. And Israel and Saudi Arabia have been working together for a long time. So Israel, look at what happened with Netanyahu during the Obama years. He was against the policy of the United States government, Netanyahu was, and the Congress in bipartisan standing ovation after standing ovation. If Netanyahu says back off and they don't back off, I'll give him all the credit in the world. So far we don't know where Israel stands on this particular issue. That's why we're saying hold a week. Let's see if they keep talking like this.
Exactly, and then I want to be clear that it's not just Republican senators that are speaking out. We have Democratic lawmakers as well. Chris Murphy is one of them. So just one quick video from Senator Murphy, and we'll talk about that as well. Take a look.
If Saudi Arabia took a US resident, lured him into a consulate and killed him, it's time for the United States to rethink our military, political, and economic relationship with Saudi Arabia.
So again, strong words, and it's credit where credit is due.
One last guy, another guy I often criticize, Rand Paul. He was the first to jump out on this issue. I agree with him and say, look, Saudi Arabia's been doing this kind of nonsense for a long time, and there's no reason to back the wholesale slaughter in Yemen, let alone what happened to Khashoggi. So he's been leading on that issue, so give him credit on that. And it's a rare time that he actually lives up to his libertarian principles. And look, the reality is Saudi Arabia has been working against our interests for a long time, and a lot of times it's covered up. 15 out of the 19 hijackers were Saudis. Bin Laden was Saudi, but we decided to attack Afghanistan and Iraq instead. So that made no sense, and everybody covered it up. That's why I'm surprised this story is getting so much attention, because normally when Saudi Arabia does wrongdoing, which is almost all the time, the press doesn't care, the politicians don't care. There's something weird going on. That's why I keep mentioning Israel. I wonder if there's a rift in their alliance, and that's why all of a sudden when Saudi Arabia does something wrong, everybody's piling on. I don't know that at all. I'm just telling you, it's my analysis of the alliances in the area that are usually relevant. I mean, look, I'll give you one last example. The Saudis, excellent reporting in America that they funded the Sunni insurgency against us in Iraq. That kills thousands of our troops. Forget one Saudi citizen who's a Washington Post columnist, killed thousands of our troops, and the politicians were like, nope, Saudi Arabia's great. I don't know what you're talking about, right? So there's something weird about this story.
So this is just my guess. Like now we're just kind of sharing our theories and speculation, but I think that this has a lot to do with the current climate toward journalists in general, right? And also, this was a Washington Post reporter living in the United States. I mean, I think that the press does have a lot more power than a lot of us realize, right? And so if they decide that this is a big story and they want to draw attention to it, then they're gonna do it. And I feel like the press has done a decent job covering this story. Whereas when it comes to other issues involving Saudi Arabia and its wrongdoings, the press might cover it in 1 or 2 stories and then they drop it.
Yeah, excellent point, Anna. And that might be the simple explanation. And so the Washington Post is all over it. They killed one of their columnists, right? And so number one, it affects them. But number two, they think, well, wait, if we let that stand,
exactly,
any one of us could walk into any consulate and get murdered. And then is the US gonna have our back or not? We got columnists, reporters, et cetera, all across the world. New York Times obviously feels the same way, and a lot of the press too. So yes, this might be driven by the press more than the politicians. Like, are you going to literally let them kill us? And so that's probably why it's getting all the attention that it's getting. But don't get me wrong, rightfully so.
Yes.
We cannot have our reporters walking into foreign embassies and getting dismembered. I know the world is unraveling and we've got a lot of dictators doing insane things, but for God's sake, we got to draw the line somewhere. And if they were finally drawing the line on Saudi Arabia on this, fantastic.
Yeah. We got to take a quick break. We have some more international news when we come back, including the story of an American graduate student who has been detained in Israel.
All right, back on the Young Turks. First of all, NordVPN, you guys know about them. You know you're gonna save 66% for a 2-year membership. If you go to nordvpn.com/TYT, they protect the things that you look at on your computer. That is a thing you need protected. And you can connect up to 6 devices. I've connected 3 or 4. I keep losing track. They've got military grade encryption. So makes sense. Protect your computer. NordVPN.com/TYT or promo code TYT. Okay, now your comments. Smooth writes in from the member section. These are all member section. Oh, we gotta check in on the thermometer. See how it's going. TYT.com/join. Okay, Smooth writes in. It's not a stretch to believe Saudi Arabia would dismember someone. They stone people for no reason.
Right.
I forgot. Yeah, it's like I literally forgot about that, and that's a great point. It's not like whoa, dismembering someone with a bone saw. I mean, they also behead people, so that's dismembering. So it's not for them. For our context, it's insanity. For their context, it might be relatively normal punishment. Okay, Jamie, remember when Trump continuously went after Clinton for being pro-Saudi Arabia? Pepperidge Farm remembers. Okay, Jamie, I love that ending. That's an old commercial.
Oh, okay. I was like, wait, what? What's
okay? Stovetop, I'm staying. Pepperidge Farm remembers. Time to make the donuts. Okay, I see you, Jamie. Okay, nice job. Okay, these random old taglines brought to you by the Young Turks. Okay, Dr. Chaos. I thought of that this morning. Maybe we'll talk about it in a post game. But I got up and I thought, like, I get up so early and I got to go to work right away, and I'm like, time to make the donuts. Okay. Anyway, Dr. Chaos MD. I'm sure Trump cares about the weapons deal with the Saudis to some degree. However, I'm sure the main reason Trump isn't going to punish Saudi leadership is because of the 8 businesses he registered there during his campaign.
Yep.
Excellent point. And he doesn't want to lose out on the money that goes straight into his pocket when the Saudis stay at his hotel and intentionally overpay for their stays. That is another great point. They do that. So the Saudis are very strong in how they pay for my hotels, right? And Eclectic Miscellanea, last one says, so what would Saudi Arabia have to do for Trump to decide that we have to cancel those arm deals? I know, maybe someone should tell him that Saudi Arabia donated millions of dollars to the Clinton Foundation. Soon Trump will be saying we got to stop selling arms to the crooked Saudis and investigate what they did to that reporter. By the way, the reason he's making that point is because the Saudis gave millions to the Clinton Foundation. Saudis ain't nobody's fool in that regard. They're like, we'll bribe the Clintons and the Trumps. Why wouldn't we buy both of them? It's for them, it's pennies they found on a couch. Here, a couple of million to the Clintons, couple of million to Trump. Make it 100 million. What difference does it make for the billions that they get in return? All right, let's do the next story.
All right. The Israeli government has detained a US graduate student at its airport. This is a graduate student who has grandparents from Palestine, and the Israeli government is justifying their decision to detain her and also take away her passport because they believe that she is part of the Israeli boycott movement. So let me give you the details on who this student is and how the Israeli government is justifying this. Her name is Laura Al-Qasem. And she is a 22-year-old American citizen with Palestinian grandparents. She landed at the Ben Gurion airport last week with a valid student visa and was registered to study human rights at Israel's Hebrew University in Jerusalem. She was barred from entering the country and ordered deported. And this is all based on suspicions that she supported a Palestinian-led boycott movement. So, this is crazy. She is going to remain in detention as she awaits an appeal. So the appeal is supposed to take place at some point this week, possibly today. But the statement coming from the Israeli government indicates that they think this is completely justified. They think that she is a threat to their country. So let me give you the statement. This is from Israel's Strategic Affairs Minister. He says, "We are doing whatever we believe that is right for the security of the state of Israel, and that is more important than whatever the New York Times or other newspapers around the world will say about our policy." Again, I just want to reiterate that she is a 22-year-old student who wishes to study human rights at a university in Israel.
At Hebrew University?
Yes.
Okay, so lots to note here. First off, credit to so many people in Israel fighting for her and in Jewish Americans here as well. By the way, and this is shocking, not just left wing, that's totally unsurprising, but right wing Israelis and Jewish Americans also fighting for her here in America. I'll get to that in a second. Hebrew professor at University of Florida that she took, Dror Aben David, said she had an open, positive attitude towards Judaism, Jews in the state of Israel, and he's stepping up to fight for her. Hebrew University itself with a vigorous defense of her. And then I was most surprised by Bret Stephens and Barry Weiss in New York Times with a vigorous defense of her as well. Now, the reason I was very surprised by that is, first of all, they themselves in that article described themselves as unhinged Zionists.
Wow.
Okay, that's nice honesty there, and I appreciate that. And they prove it. They later say that the boycott divestment program is a thinly veiled form of bigotry. Nonsense, not remotely true. And that it is that boycotts of Jewish businesses have a particularly foul pedigree in Nazi Germany. I understand the historical reference they're making. It in this context is a preposterous analogy. So these are the guys I'm giving credit to, by the way. Okay, so and they said the group that she was part of was connected to Americans for Muslims from Palestine. They say that that group wants to end Israel's occupation and colonization of Arab lands, and hence it is code words for dismantling the Jewish state. No, it's not. It's to end the occupation of the Palestinians. So, but even those guys, right? Even the right-wing Jewish Americans that are deeply Zionist, like, what are you guys doing? Don't put her in prison. That's not good. That doesn't show strength. That shows weakness. And this is totally running amok now. And that's the problem with the right-wing government of Israel. They are going, I mean, you know what happens when you get further and further right-wing, and that's where they are. They've pretty much lost their minds. So this woman is ethnically Palestinian. She's an American, okay? So is there bigotry by the right-wing government of Israel towards Palestinians? Of course there is. It's not, anyone who debates that is just totally disingenuous. But it's not just Palestinians by descent and birth that they're holding up. They held up Catherine Frank, a professor at Columbia, and then deported her from Israel because she was a leader for Jewish Voice for Peace. How dare you be for peace? I don't care if you're Jewish or not. They expelled her from the country. Simone Zimmerman, an American Jewish activist who lives in Israel and founder of If Not Now, another person who wants to end occupation. These are wonderful human beings. They quizzed her on her political views, including her views of Netanyahu. What? So now, what? That means if you go to Israel, even if you're Jewish, nothing matters anymore. If you're not in favor of Netanyahu, the extreme right winger in charge of Israel today, I guess you're not welcome. So no thank you, Israel, not interested. I'm not going to Israel. I think that if you are a left winger, it doesn't matter what your background is, at this point, because of the actions of this particular government, you'd be nuts to go to Israel. Apparently they're gonna put you in prison, they're gonna deport you. Look, one last one because it's amazing. There's a ton of them. Peter Beinart, they did it too. That's insanity. Again, he's a left-wing Zionist, but a very clear Zionist. Anyway, Meyer Koplow, he is the chairman of Brandeis University's board and a pro-Israel philanthropist. But they found a brochure after he'd been in Israel in his bags. Apparently they're gonna rifle through your bags. They're gonna look at all your stuff to try to see if you don't despise Palestinians. And then they're gonna say, all right, we're gonna interrogate you because you don't hate people. All right, so you know what they did to him? Because he went and had something they called This Week in Palestine. Because he is the chairman of Brandeis University's board. He's intellectually curious. He's a pro-Israel philanthropist. Anyway, they're like, no, how dare you try to look into the Palestinians? And they interrogated him for hours at the airport. No, they've lost their minds, man.
Whenever there's a flare-up in violence between the Israelis and the Palestinians, the argument that you hear from the pro-Netanyahu group is, well, look, Israel, yeah, they might be using disproportionate force against the Palestinians, but remember, Israel's a true democracy. No,
joke.
it's not, but
Hilarious.
it's not. You can't argue that Israel currently, with this right-wing government, is exercising true democracy if it goes after anyone who's intellectually curious, anyone who might have mild criticism for the behavior of the Israeli government. A democracy is supposed to welcome that type of criticism. It's supposed to allow for information so people can make educated, informed decisions. If Netanyahu and the Israeli government is actively going after people as innocent as a 22-year-old American student who wants to study human rights in Israel, then that's not a democracy.
She's been held in detention for over a week now. They said, no, we'll let her out as soon as she says that she has totally disavowed any of her previous policy positions. By the way, her lawyer says, she was part of that group, and she was the president of the group, to be fair, but she never even held those particular positions. It was the group that held the positions. But if I was her, I would never back down from that. And look, and if you don't know, Brandeis University is a well-known Jewish university in America. You got Brandeis University and Hebrew University on the right side, okay, meaning the correct side, okay? And the Israeli government's like, no, we don't trust them. Oh, come on. Look, they've totally lost their minds. So you know what they say? And by the way, the BDS movement, they're like, no. Not allowed, how dare you boycott us, because that might work. Wait, the terrorism is unacceptable. I agree 100% with that. It's immoral, it's counterproductive, and it kills innocent civilians. But wait a minute, if you don't, okay, so violence is not acceptable, that makes sense. But non-violence is also not acceptable. So what's acceptable? The acceptable position apparently is you have to go to Israel and say, yes, you should occupy the Palestinians forever. They're not really people. You should do whatever you want to crush them. And Netanyahu is right about everything. No, thank you. That is not a democracy. That's not remotely a democracy. By the way, as long as you continue the occupation, not remotely a democracy. What kind of democracy says, oh, democracy for me, if you're the right religion, right? Oh, we let some of the Palestinians vote. They don't have quite the same rights in Israel. But how about the other Palestinians, the ones, millions that you're occupying? Where's their democracy? No. And if you disagree with us, we'll put you in prison, okay? So last thing, why this particular group, why are they so animated about this? One of the, again, Gilad Erdan that Anna quoted earlier, he said that this group was one of the most extreme and hate-filled anti-Israeli BDS groups in the US. Whoa, I said, okay, now I'm curious, like what did they do? Did they say outrageous things? They apparently were in favor of a boycott against Sabra hummus. What? Do you understand? Sabra, the hummus, not Hamas, hummus. They wanted to boycott a dip. And so they're like, how dare you? Hate-filled being against hummus like that. No. This is them saying this could work. We're gonna go nuclear on the boycott movement because because economic actions work. They worked against South Africa. They worked in Egypt during the Egyptian revolution when everybody went on strike. That is, if you hit people in their pocketbook, no matter who they are and where they live, that is the most effective thing. That is why they're so deathly afraid of the BDS movement that they think boycotting hummus is extreme and hate-filled. No. And by the way, last thing, guys, if you care at all about Israel and you shut down any efforts to go to the United Nations and to do things in a nonviolent fashion, what does that leave? That only leaves violence as an option. It's a terrible idea. It's a terrible idea that's gonna lead to perpetual war. But that's exactly what the right wing feeds off, no matter which country they're in. We think perpetual war is a problem. They think it's the solution. That's what allows them to keep power. It's gross. And look, if I was her, it's easy for me to say she wants to study at Hebrew University and she got in, and et cetera, and she wants to live her life based on that. But if I would never live in a country that doesn't believe in democracy like this.
Right, I mean, if they're willing to do this to people like her, I mean, I personally would be worried about my safety. If they have their sights set on people who want to engage in nonviolent protests, and they want to retaliate against them like this.
No, I mean, think about how authoritarian Israel's become. Because of this video alone, I probably now cannot go to Israel. What kind of country is that?
Certainly would not want to.
I wouldn't. Would you risk it? I'm not risking it. Going into those right-wing lunatics' hands and they throw you in prison for disagreeing with Netanyahu and interrogate you? No, thank you. It's like if you came here and you're like, hey, I don't like Dick Cheney. Oh, you're going to prison, we're gonna interrogate you, et cetera. I think that Trump is wrong on the tariffs. How dare you, extremist, et cetera, and we're gonna kick you out. It's just, no, even Trump doesn't do that. That's how crazy it is. So, and by the way, all the right-wingers here, I gave credit to the good guys who spoke up and even people I genuinely disagree with. I'm curious, Ben Shapiro and others, Dave Rubin, all those guys who say, free speech, free speech.
Oh, it's such a good point.
So are you in favor of her free speech? I don't know, maybe they are. Maybe they're gonna be principled on this. If Barry Weiss can do it, there's no reason why Shapiro and Dave Rubin shouldn't be on the side of her. Are you in favor of allowing BDS movement overall? Or are you in favor of laws they're trying to pass here in America to end that movement and punish people and economically and otherwise for speaking their minds? I assume that if you're actually in favor of free speech, that you would say, no, anyone should be allowed to say anything regarding BDS movement and boycotting Israel. And that I don't know about Israel, but this is America and we live in a free country. Is that your opinion, Ben Shapiro? I'm curious, because I hear you love to get paid on college campuses and hence you love free speech. But does that apply to everyone else? You know what, we should have people ask him. Let's find out. And hey, I don't know, maybe he'll be principled. Good luck.
We got to take a quick break. Let's do that, and when we come back, a pretty explosive story from TYT Investigates.